Welcome back, followers of Morning Jim Poetry. I think that's what you are out there. I hope so. Uh, I've got another program today for the weekend of November 3rd. As you will recall, early this year I moved the readings from weekly to every other week, or approximately twice monthly. I guess I'm getting lazy along with aging, but I kind of like this frequency, and I'm going to continue at this interval, and I hope it works for you. After all, you can read poems every day if you want. I wish I had time to do that, and some days I do. Today I'm going to read you some poems I've written over the years. Some of them were published in this book that I have here, Immortal Prairie. Let's see if I could get it up right side up. You could actually see the title, Immortal Prairie. And that's the title poem. We're not going to read that today. I've read that in the past. But I am going to read some of these, and then some other poems that I've written that are unpublished. This is called From the ER, One Day's Tale. It is said, one day tells its tale to another, and so the night shift passes on its story when one brother slashes the throat of the other, and the cleanup here in the ER was truly gory. There was a 4-unit, 2-hour blood transfusion interspersed with saline to combat shock. And we noted the victims' multiple contusions. Around the shoulders especially, where he took a knock from a weighty frying pan his brother wielded, with a fury no stranger could have matched. And so it seems he finally fell and yielded to the knife. Luckily, the carotid wasn't scratched, but the sternocleidomastoid muscle was transected, exposing the jugular vein on the left side, which the surgeons duly reconnected. The rent was only an inch wide. There's more to the story. He was the lucky brother. The police had to kill Johnny, the other. That's kind of a gruesome poem from earlier in my career, and I think it has a lot of virtues as a poem, but that's for you to decide, not me. I like the poem, and so I felt like I had to read it. But here's another one I wrote earlier in my career. And it's a poem, another poem about medical subjects. And this one's called After Surgery. Some of you might sympathize with some of these observations if you've ever had surgery, which I suspect many of you may have had some time in the past. Drunkenly happy after surgery and resting in bed, no care in the world, until somebody said a bit unctuously that it was time for me to void. I giggled at the silly word. The next time my eyes opened, in walked Mr. Catheter, slightly tipsy himself, leaning on the arm of a nurse, grinning his curly smile, and sat there at the foot of my bed. Uh-oh, if that wasn't bad enough, the phone rang. It was the deacon. I'd like to pray for you, she said. Anything in particular you need? Yes, I said. Is there a prayer for peeing? Of course. God knows, and here it is. Lord, let it be with him as it is with men, that he may stand and proudly pee until the job is duly, truly done. Relieved, I closed my eyes, but there was Mr. C, smiling his curly smile and waiting. And then came a sudden urge. I struggled up and was helped to the loo, where the prayed-for pee burst forth in a proud and satisfying stream. Back in bed, but before I closed my eyes, what should I see but Mr. Catheter, no longer smiling, escorted out by his ever-faithful nurse. Crazy. By the way, have you ever wondered where the word loo came from as a substitute word for toilet? Loo. Well, it's a little complicated, but kind of funny, really. The British developed the first flush toilet. The French didn't know what to think of it, but they liked the idea, so they imported some. And when they were installed in hotels, they were called the lieu anglais, which was French for the English place. And there may be a lot of double meanings in there, at least in the mind of the average Frenchman. But the French word lieu, which means place, was corrupted by the English by spelling it L-O-O instead of in the original French spelling, which I won't attempt. There's a lot of I's, E's, and U's. But anyway, that's where the word going to the loo came from. All right, that's enough of that. Here's a poem from a non-medical perspective, a sort of rumination about the creative process. And it's called Inspiration. It is a fickle mistress creeping into my bed right before REM sleep, smiling or frowning, tickling the amygdala, arousing up the frontal lobe centers of deep idea torrents, odd words, carousing syllables, sweet distress. After she has her way with the body of my thought, alters dreams, confuses and leaves me damp, uncertain. The fuzzy light of dawn beams faintly through the curtain, bringing the burden of distracting day. Now the verse from this long night is laid to rest, as is a downy finch or robin in the nest. Perhaps tomorrow to grow and fly away, or less lucky, never see the light of day. That's inspiration. Okay, so I'm going to read another poem from this book, Immortal Prairie. And it's a poem about the Highland estate of Glendy, one of two shooting estates owned by Sir Charles Gladstone, who is the great-grandson of the 19th century British Prime Minister William Gladstone. In my book, it is overprinted in a panoramic view of the great geographic center of the estate, and I recopied it to make it easier for me to read, but I can show you what it looks like in the book itself. And in the center of the book, there's this tiny point, and the mountain is called Clochnaben, and Clochnaben means the rock on the mountain. Cloch na Ben. Ben is the Scottish dialect word for mountain. And so here's the poem, Highland Ritual Glendy. Here the Dye water splashes in torrents of whiskey foam over unrelenting granite boulders in this wild glen where tall reaching firs have filtered Highland light 100 years. I tread softly the damp, uncertain moss and fallen twigs in an open glade sprawling with brown bracken where a startling blue sky reaches down to light my altar. The glare of a rare full sun strikes the great rock of Cloch na Ben as the first distant clacking of beaters sounds through the silent woods. Noisy jays and verging pigeons skitter from their night perches, and now come waves of cackling cocks hurtling like exotic thunderbolts through thin fir tops. Fair game, they fall to the firing, or maybe not, and feather puffballs twirl quietly in the still cold air. Here in these highland copses, gamekeepers are my priests today, where flight and chance and time and ancient rituals hold sway. That's a fun poem. I mean, it describes exactly what was going on one of these driven pheasant shoots that I attended while in Scotland that year. And it's pretty exciting, pretty challenging, and very popular and very expensive. But it was worth it. I enjoyed every minute of it. I hope these verses have given you at least a little insight into my sources of inspiration as a poet. And if you don't have a copy of Immortal Prairie, please contact me for a slightly free copy of Immortal Prairie. I have fewer than 20 copies left, and if you send me $10 to cover packing and mailing fees, you can have one. That is one of 10 copies. Please, only one copy per order for those of you who might not have any copies. As for this program, I'll be back again in 2 weeks. I'll be reading a few more of my poems, and I'm willing to read one of your poems as well if you send it to me as an attachment to an email at the following email address, jimransom506@gmail.com. That's Jim Ransom, that's all one word, jimransom506@gmail.com, no caps. jimransom506@gmail.com. I'll be with you again in 2 weeks. Until then, enjoy the lingering fall weather and stay warm. It's getting colder every day here in western Pennsylvania, where I now hang out. Bye now.